So, kid is on the bus. I'm still shaking the effects of the nighttime cold medicine, which I try not to take too often. Most of the time, I end up telling myself, after it's, past a certain time, yeah, I can't take it now, so don't even try. But I'm still feeling the effects of it, and it's the next day. That's one reason why, even whenever it's within the time that, I can take it, I try not to have to. Because I still feel like I'm drugged as hell. And that stuff makes me loopy and emotional at the same time. That's a bad idea. Then you end up sending weird texts and, agonizing over things and like that day I texted my grandfather all that stuff I didn't want to say to him. Because some part of me wanted to say worse and be a lot more upfront than that. Because some part of me always will. I just have to have a handle on that. So anyway, there are reasons why I avoid mind-altering substances. I mean, if that's what cold medicine does to me whenever I'm sick, imagine what the rest of it would do to me. So, even whenever I'm sick, I try not to have to take it because I don't really want to end up emotionally texting people. Because there's unresolved issues there. At least I know that it's that. It has to be extreme unresolved issues between us. So, the only other person I've ever done that to is literally my little brother. And it was, resolved years ago. He knows, he's acknowledged it. None of it's really a secret. With my grandfather, it pretty much only torments me because he doesn't know half of it. And then, there's this portion of crap that he actually, my grandfather only blatantly took sides once. And when he did, it left some scars. Not on my body. Nothing you can see like that. Because the one time he really took sides, it was after I'd been assaulted as a teenager. And no, I wasn't asking for it. I was in my bedroom. This guy had been stalking me. Apparently, there's aspects of it I found out later that I promised myself he'd never find out. Because quite literally, it added up to somebody set me up. And that somebody was grandmother. Not only would her family balk at that idea and completely go apeshit on me, because the very idea would offend them. But my grandfather, I'm not worried about them. Personally, they can go fucking themselves. They care more about a narrative than they do about the truth. They want to be comfortable and believe that she was some saintly old lady. My grandmother was anything but that. Not even my grandfather would stretch it that far. And, he was pretty much the embodiment of Love is Blind. So, he's literally why my mom thought love was blind. I didn't know she used to say that. But, I didn't know that was why. Until I'd lived with it and then gotten old enough that I realized, that That was probably like the only example that she really had. And that was her example. She thought that love was blind. I guess it should speak of good things that Chris thinks that love is two best friends who give adult hugs. Or rather, super best friends, as he calls it. Because my mom thought that love was one person ignoring some pretty nasty flaws in another person and just not acknowledging them and refusing to acknowledge things that they do. I mean, she grew from that and learned, but we look at our parents with clearer eyes than they look at themselves sometimes. So, yeah. My mom learned some fucked up lessons there. And then she walked into some shit just like her dad. Not just like her mom. It always, like, really gets me that people think that, like, you have to be like your mom if you're a girl. You have to be like your dad if you're a guy. No, actually, my mom is more like her dad than she realized. Except she wasn't blind. And nor did she want to be. My grandfather walked right into my grandmother's trap. And he didn't even try to get away. And I guess that's another reason why I don't tell him. Because now he's, like, finally happy. And I don't want him to be miserable. So, like, you don't want to tell him, hey, you know what you really missed? Not only was this woman blatantly homicidal, and not only is she the reason for 90% of the scars on my body, done very purposefully by her, you know, not only did she do this, but she also, like, tortured me and set me up to be raped by my stalker. She took money from him to allow this and to set this up so that neither of you would wake up or hear me scream. Like, I can't tell him that. I can't tell him that. There's nothing that makes this easy to tell anybody. Let alone the person who before all that you trusted to never hurt you. And I didn't trust him not to after that. Because he stood there and said that I must have wanted to be raped. Now, mind you, in society, I guess you only get like one instance where you get to be raped, and actually tell people and try to get something done about it before, like, automatically you're lying. So I was actually assaulted later by someone that I was dating. I left him because of it. But I lost someone who was, and had been for years, one of my very best friends. Artemis, although it was a nickname, she went by other things as well. Anayu, 18, no, it was 22. Anayu, 22, and some other stuff. Well, the full thing was Anayu, the Holy Wolf, but I'm pretty sure a couple other people also went by that one, so I just stuck with Artemis. And, she later ended up assaulted by the same guy. She wasn't dating him. But she'd stood by her fiancé and wouldn't talk to me unless to try and convince me to go back to this guy. Or, you know, and all this, because he didn't like it. Well, apparently the people he likes sucks. I mean, and then this wasn't even, like, only the second time. This was actually the third. The second time, she'd like trusted someone whenever I'd been homeless, so I trusted her judgment. I never trusted her judgment on another human being ever again after that. And she never knew the extent of what happened. Um, she knew that they would drag me back and that I was scared of them finding me. She knew that I was assaulted at least once. She did not know the level of crap that went on in that house. They basically held me against my will and wouldn't let me leave. But she'd known someone, I guess, and I walked right into it. This isn't something where I was snatched off the street. I walked right into it because I knew someone who vouched for them. It was only supposed to be me sleeping on their couch, I guess, or something, couch surfing, and catching a shower while looking for a job. It ended up with a place down the street refusing to hire me because I had bruises around my neck. Because they didn't want their customers to see this. Nobody would hire me because I was bruised to hell. And if I tried to run away, they'd drag me back. I wasn't kept under some bed in a box like that poor girl in that one story. They knew where I was. At first, it actually took quite a while before they'd let me leave at all. But whenever I did, I was looking for jobs. And nobody would hire me because I had all these bruises. And one place blatantly, like, they would say this too, like, and they would assume that I was dating someone who was beating the shit out of me. I was like, I'm not. I just have nowhere and no way out. And in the end, I had to go so far away. And I needed help to do that. So it's not even like I even could really do that on my own because there was a bunch of people who would just drag me back. She doesn't know the extent. She knows this stuff happened. But then, like, he got a hold of me, like, right afterwards. And we dated, and it was okay for a while. Like, it wasn't even bad. Not that I could see. I mean, I was still recently traumatized, so I guess there was a lot I didn't see. And it wasn't the greatest decision to date at that point. Whenever he decided that his solution to, I guess he needed to, like, I said no, so he bent me over and did it anyway. So I couldn't fight back because he was restraining me. Wasn't the sort of thing I can get out of. There are certain holds that it doesn't matter, I'm never going to be able to get out of them. I have so much wrong in my body. There's a lot I compensate for on a daily basis so that I can move around normally. There's going to be things that can disable me. And in that case, though, the very clothing I wore became what held me down. Afterwards, I was advised by a police officer not to report it. I mean, I'd already figured. It was kind of like a thing. At that point, I'd been raped 3 times. At that point, the people who blame you for it, they get louder. Except for my grandfather, he just got quieter, which was a bit more like getting louder in his case. Because he wasn't. I've learned over the years, if he's not saying it's not your fault, he's quietly blaming you. So, the last one was my ex-husband. As far as the ex-boyfriend, I walked right into that relationship. And I was leaving that relationship too. Like, it got bad, so I left. You know, I mean, that's what you do, right? My ex-husband, I was guilted into this relationship first off. And then he and Suzanne had been sort of, I guess, trying to help me through it while I was pregnant. And at least that's what I thought. The reality was that they were both taking complete. I mean, I didn't have a family around me helping me through this, so I was vulnerable to this sort of shit. No family, no support system to speak of. I had friends, yes, but I mean, like, family. It's not like my brother said, oh my god, this horrible thing happened, I'm gonna show up. No, my grandmother got sick and half the family showed up. I got raped and brutalized, and this was to be expected because I'm my mother's daughter. And bad things are supposed to happen to me. Because I must deserve it. So, you know, all the surgeries that I went through whenever I was younger, none of them ever showed up. Almost die, nobody cares. That's my family. That's what's left of my family. My relatives. My surviving relatives are major ass dicks. And they expect me to speak highly of them. But the reality is they've never shown me anything that deserves it. So anyway, stuff that happened with my ex-husband was not... It was, several shades of bad. But it was also, yeah. She, never physically hurt me. The problem is, well, I shouldn't say physically. Drugging me, that counts as physical, right? There was, It's been some years since all of this, and I'm not over it. And that's okay. Because I don't have to be. I just refuse to take it out on other people. Now, as far as the people who did it, or who had any sort of role in it, oh, I have my feelings about that. And there's no way, even if I was quote unquote over it in any sense of the word, I would not be able to, like, work in the same room as that woman. Or just, especially with the expectation that we interact. Like, what kind of toxic crap is this? I can recognize quite clearly that if I had actually had a family that had stood by me, I would have never been in any of these situations to begin with. So, for those of you who have stellar family, guess what? There's a lot of situations you're not going to end up in. But don't judge someone because they've been through a bunch of shit. And that's one thing I've learned. It's also why, whenever I write villains, they don't pull punches. Because real life, bad people don't pull punches. Or they might if they like have some really fucked up reasoning, but you have to give them a fucked up reasoning for it. You know, all these writers and they're like, we're not going to talk about the fact that the first thing that often happens to a woman in this situation is that they rape her. We're not going to talk about all this. And then, like, whenever I do, I must be obsessed with it, says one person. Mostly people leave me alone because they know I've been through a lot of stuff. Anyone who knows me is like, no, she's really not obsessed with this, and if you're trying to put it places it doesn't belong, that means you're obsessed with it. But, you know, I do have people who are supportive. The problem is, whenever I was a kid, in the way family is supposed to support you and be like, hey, yeah, I got you, sleep on my couch. Something like that. That never happened. And that was so far away from what I would have expected from them, because I expected them to not do anything at that point. Long before that point. And that I just accepted it. But whenever certain people threw it in my face that they helped some homeless person who was a perfect stranger, so they must be wonderful people, I also called out on that and had some issues with that. Because literally, you did not give two shits whenever it was family. But yes, you're a great, wonderful person whenever it's a homeless person you don't know. Also, doing one good deed like that doesn't make you a stellar person. In fact, the homeless people have to be the most careful of are the people who aren't homeless, who claim to help them. There's so much that goes on. So many people who will, whenever you're in this low part of society, take complete advantage and victimize you and then use the fact that they're helping. And literally, if they do something to you, there's no recourse for you. In practice, there's supposed to be, but there's not. So, there's just not. Idealistically, yeah, sure. Reality, no. So, you're on your own. Your only allies are other homeless people. Maybe the occasional person who tries to give one of you a hand up. A guy with bruises like that, maybe they would have been accepted. You know, but as a woman, it was more disturbing, I guess, for them to see me bruised like that. Not my family, though. My mom was awesome and my dad was great, but they're dead. So, it didn't matter. I didn't matter. So, I ended up in like this sort of domino effect series of situations. And I still ended up having to claw out. In the end, that didn't work. Still, my grandfather knew where I was the entire time and knew what was happening. Story of my life, he did nothing. Instead of helping whenever my ex-husband did shit and I was trying to find a way out, they all told me to basically take care of it myself. There's no support in my family among my relatives. None. And I know better than to look there for it. I have family who are not them. We've become such over the years. But when I was a kid and I needed them, when I was young and foolish and thrust out into the world by myself, I needed them. I had literally nowhere to turn. And do you want to know who I relate to? Who most of my friends ended up being? Other kids who'd been in the system. Most of them who never got to go home. And a bunch of those kids are dead. And you would think, that statistically, you would think because a lot of kids in the system end up on drugs that it would be drugs, but no. Carl died through what is presumed to be a random act of violence. Tatum used her diabetes to commit suicide. There were other people, they just disappeared one day. Just gone. They just up and left. Sometimes you hear from them years later, and they just couldn't be around it anymore. They just left, didn't keep contact with anybody, needed to start over. They just picked up and started running from it one day. Maybe they'd always been running from it, and nobody could see it. Or maybe they just decided in that moment to do it, Then there were those that did end up on drugs and struggled and got clean even. The ones that don't get clean, they're still big kids hurting. They're just trying to drown out their own screams. And there's not very many people who understand that. It's not about, this happened years ago. The problem is that the pain is still there. And it's still quite loud and big and nasty and festering and all sorts of stuff. And even if you do face it, it's not going to go away. A lot of people can't handle that. And I don't particularly blame them. What I blame them for is the way that they handle it. Because there are other ways to try and drown out what amounts to screaming inside. To try and do something constructive with it. Drugs are not the answer. But it's often what happens. But it's also often what doesn't. Carl eventually got clean. He tried many times before that and failed, but in the end he died clean. He